Welcome to the Liberté Plantation and our Zoom production of Isn't It Romantic, a short play written and directed by Candace Perry. Actors are Sallie Tighe in the part of Beth Sanders, Cynthia Harrington as Claire St. John, and Racine Oxtoby as her daughter Catherine. The room you see pictured here is where we imagine the play taking place. However, the actors are safely performing from their homes. The time is the present. And now, isn't it romantic?
Exquisite.
Oh, Mama, it's perfect. I still can't believe you found this plantation on the internet. No one else in the sorority has ever mentioned Liberté Plantation before.
You didn't tell anything.
No, ma'am, not a word.
Good girl. We want you to be the first. Surely if this is opening day, they haven't had time to book any weddings. Can you imagine a more romantic place to say your vows?
Ugh, everything is so beautiful.
And authentic. Take a look at that ceiling medallion. Not one of those tacky plastic jobs. Made out of marble dust, horsehair, and molasses.
Oh, wow. Kyle is going to adore this. Don't you think?
Sweetheart, Kyle adores whatever you tell him to adore. Excellent paint job. Not one of those quick slap-it-on covered-up operations that you see on so many so-called restorations. I do believe we have found the real deal.
Yes, ma'am. I can't believe I'm so lucky.
How many times must I tell you that we make our luck? And you have done very well, despite certain challenges.
Oh, please don't go picking on Daddy. At least the two of you are talking about the wedding. Maybe you'll get to be friends.
Catherine, divorced people have no business being friends. If they could be friends, they should have stayed married and spare everyone a great deal of grief.
Yes, ma'am.
I take my share of the blame. What was I thinking? Eloping like that to New York City of all places?
Mama, you and Daddy were married for 25 years. I don't think eloping had anything to do with your divorce.
You don't know the half of it, but don't get me started. What I know is that we're going to do your wedding properly.
But not too formal.
Now, don't you worry. Your wedding will be classic. I'm so impressed with this place. Nowadays, it seems the only plantations they keep up are the ones owned by the oil companies. Something tawdry about that.
At Sarah Ruth's wedding, we could all smell the refinery next door.
Such a shame that so many homes along the river road have been allowed to fall into the wrong hands. Now this place...
Hello? Can I help you?
Oh, sorry, we let ourselves in. The door was open.
We have an appointment for 1 o'clock.
We're early.
Yes, a bit. You must be Mrs. St. John, and
Catherine, her daughter.
And I'm Beth Sanders. I was just putting on the finishing touches before your tour was scheduled to begin.
Oh, well, don't let us get in the way of your work. If you'll just tell the owner we're here.
I am the owner. We spoke on the phone, Mrs. St. John.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm terrible at remembering names. I just didn't expect. I didn't.
That I'd be black?
Well, it is unusual to meet an Afro-American who takes such an interest in the historic restoration of plantations. I simply meant that...
Mrs. St. John, I'm well aware of what you meant.
We love your plantation. It's perfect.
Thank you. Let me put away this dust rag and get my notes.
Well, she didn't need to get so uppity.
Mama, People don't use that word anymore. It's racist.
You know perfectly well there's not a racist bone in my body. She didn't need to be so rude.
Let's not argue, okay?
Who's arguing? I was simply making the point.
Oh, Mama, you're right. Miss Sanders has done a fantastic job.
Thank you.
And we can't wait to hear all about what you've done here at Liberté Plantation. Does the tour begin in this room?
Actually, the tour begins at the slave cabin in the back.
Oh. Well, I know we came early. We'll wait if your tour guides are still on break. I hope you don't allow them to smoke, though. I just hate seeing those girls in their hoop skirts smoking.
I don't have girls in costumes. I conduct a tour. No hoop skirts here, since we're concerned with the year 1811. Hoop skirts didn't come into style until the mid-19th century.
I always pictured hoop skirts on a plantation.
That's what I hope to set right with this tour. So many associations with the antebellum period have been incorrectly presented in popular culture and even in our history books.
Live and learn, as I always say. Are we your first customers?
Yes, in fact, you are.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, let me give you some background, and then we'll proceed to the cabin. 200 years ago, the largest revolt of enslaved people in North America began right here.
You don't mean it. Well, I've toured plantation homes all the way from Virginia to Louisiana, and I've never heard tell of a slave revolt in these parts.
I'm not surprised you never heard of it about the revolt before now. I grew up around here, and I never heard of it either.
My high school history class left it out too.
It wasn't until I was teaching at Oberlin in Ohio that I learned about the revolt of 1811, right here in my own backyard. So I started researching the history of the people enslaved here. When it was time to retire, I took my savings and came back, determined to create a truly authentic plantation experience.
Wow, that's amazing.
And from the looks of it, you've gotten every detail just right.
So let's begin, shall we? Most people have heard of the Nat Turner, John Brown rebellions, but few know that in January of 1811, Charles DeLong led 500 enslaved men and women.
Well, there used to be a DeLond plantation on the river road. Was that his?
No, Charles DeLong was the enslaved person on that plantation, the leader of the slave revolt.
Oh, I see.
He was joined by almost 500 others from plantations all along the river road in a desperate attempt for freedom.
Just fascinating. You know, we are in a bit of a hurry, so maybe we could just skip some of the history part of the tour.
The history part is the tour.
I just think my mother means that she's anxious to see all of the plantation.
The purpose of Liberté Plantation Tour is to tell the story of slavery, to show how it really was and what really happened here.
Evergreen Plantation has something similar on their website. They play Old Man River and show the slaves dancing and cutting sugarcane.
The myth of the happy slave is what the tour at Liberté aims to dispel. Sugarcane plantations were brutal.
And aren't we all glad those days are behind us? Can you show us some of the other rooms? Maybe tell us a bit about the furniture.
Mrs. St. John, Catherine, I don't know what you're doing here. If you don't want to know about the history, what do you want?
We want the tour. And if the rest is done to the same high standards as this part of the house, then we'd like to engage Liberté Plantation.
For what?
Well, my wedding.
A wedding?
Yes, our Catherine is marrying a lovely young man. Kyle is from a fine family.
I have sunk my entire life savings into this place to tell a story that needs telling. I don't do weddings here.
But all the other plantations do.
All the others tell the Gone with the Wind version of what happened.
Some people prefer a more romantic version.
Enslaved women were regularly raped by their masters to produce more slaves. That's romance.
No, that's gross.
Horrible, shameful, but that's just how it was back then.
When Charles DeLong and the other leaders of the slave revolt were captured, their heads were chopped off and put on pikes lining the river road all the way to New Orleans and left to rot for months and months.
Oh, that's just horrible.
Horrible is correct. Having a wedding here would be like having a wedding at Auschwitz.
That's ridiculous. No one would want to have a wedding someplace so ugly.
This place was ugly. The slave cabin in comparison with the big house shows that.
But the house is so beautiful.
Beauty is a great deceiver. The good old days weren't so good for many people. This furniture, the ceiling medallions, this very house, all were made by real people, by enslaved humans who had their lives stolen from them.
But that was a very long time ago. Slavery is over. But this beautiful plantation remains. Surely you can see how suited the house and the grounds are for a wedding, and we would compensate you very well.
I'm well aware that even today, after other monuments to the past have been toppled, plantations still hold weddings, but not here.
But the world is different now.
Let me ask you this, Catherine. If you were marrying a Black man, would you feel any discomfort inviting his family to attend your wedding here, in a place where his people had been held against their will, raped, tortured, and murdered?
You make a good point, Miss Sanders, but Catherine isn't marrying a Black man. Not that I'd have any problem with that. In fact, in high school, she had a huge crush on a Black boy.
Mama, I had more than a crush on Devon. He was my first love. You never liked him, but Daddy did.
Your daddy was just impressed that Devon won the basketball scholarship to Duke. He was too tall for you.
Well, if he hadn't gone to Duke, maybe we would have stayed together.
No one expected you to keep a high school romance going that far apart. He moved on, but you moved on too. And look, here you are now, about to marry the most wonderful young man. If Miss Sanders is determined not to let us use Liberté for the wedding, we'd better go look at some other plantations while we're in the neighborhood.
Mama, I don't think I want to get married at a plantation after all.
Don't be ridiculous. We decided that a plantation is the perfect setting for your wedding.
No, you decided.
I don't appreciate that tone of voice, young lady.
I'm sorry. It's just, I never looked at it, from the other point of view before.
I swear, You get more like your father every day. It's not like we're asking anyone to be a slave. Miss Sanders, how much do we owe you?
Nothing. You didn't take the tour.
But I got the tour.
Yeah, you did.